Hello, I'm David Annis, Technical Agronomist with Tiger-Sul Products. I'll be visiting with you today about sulfur and cotton production. Before 1990, sulfur deficiency in crops wasn't covered in most agronomic classes. At the time, the major concern was the impact of acid rain. Sulfur deficiency, well, discussing it for the most part, nothing more than an academic exercise. However, times have changed. The 1990 amendments to the Clean Air Act of 1970 brought about programs for reducing acid deposition. Now, due to these regulations, sulfur falling on the fields from atmospheric pollution have dropped dramatically. Also, crop varieties have changed, yields have considerably increased, and some producers have changed their tillage to a minimum or no-till operation. Now, these fields have high amounts of crop residue, all leading to increased sulfur needs. Today, when the newest leaves are yellowing, there's a high chance it's sulfur deficiency. However, if the yellowing appears in the older leaves, it's most likely a nitrogen deficiency. Now, this is a graphic showing atmospheric sulfur deposition from 1986 to 2016. As you can see, the sulfur being applied has decreased dramatically. While this is great for humans, it's not so good for crop production and plants. As the graphic shows, we've moved from receiving high amounts of atmospheric sulfur on fields to receiving almost none. Since we've lost the so-called free atmospheric sulfur that's been deposited on the fields, it's up to us to determine which fields need the sulfur. We're now seeing more sulfur deficiencies than we've ever seen before. But remember, not every field is the same. Determining fields with sulfur deficiencies can be done with tissue test results, soil test, and check strips throughout the field. Now, soil testing, while not the most accurate way of determining sulfur levels, can provide a good idea of possible deficiencies. Remember though, unless you test, it's just a guess. Just like passing a football, three things can happen and two are bad. In the case of sulfur fertilizer on your cotton, you can under-fertilize, over-fertilize, or get the nutrient levels just right. In 2020, Tiger-Sul conducted many research trials based in farmers' fields. Now, these fields are typically ones that have been managed for sufficient nutrient levels, adequate soil pH levels, and are under some sort of integrated pest management program. When we collected soil samples from 52 of these research trials, we found that 94% of them were deficient in sulfur. Imagine Tiger-Sul's research and development team's surprise. The chart you see is what we use as a rule of thumb. When sulfate sulfur levels drop below 15 parts per million, or 30 pounds per acre, that's in the yellow area, we strongly recommend Tiger-Sul products. Now, when levels drop below 10 parts per million, or 20 pounds per acre, that's the red area, we expect to see sulfur deficiencies unless sulfur is being or has been applied. So how do we identify sulfur deficient fields? Well, sulfur deficiency occurs in the youngest leaves as sulfur is not mobile in the plant. This is why it's important to have a supply of plant available sulfate throughout the growing season. Nitrogen deficiency, it shows up in the older leaves as nitrogen is highly mobile in the plant. Sulfur deficiency is usually found where the crops have mined the sulfur from the soil. When looking for sulfur deficiencies, start with fields that have historically been in cotton production and then those that are low in organic matter. While organic matter is the repository for sulfur in the soil, organic matter, as a rule, cannot exchange or release enough sulfur to the plants throughout the growing season. Monitor the fields that have low cation exchange capacity soils for sulfur deficiencies. One possible reason for sulfur deficiencies in fields is that sulfate's able to move in the soil with the water. Sulfate and nitrate share much in common. They are the only two nutrients that are converted by microbes in the soil. Both can and do travel with water through the soil profile. Now, since the nitrate is a smaller molecule and the sulfate's a larger molecule, sulfate particles move somewhat slower than the speed of nitrate. Unlike nitrate, sulfur can be adsorbed or loosely held on clay particles. Now, this can occur either for a short or long period of time, and that's going to depend on the clay content, the nature of clay minerals, the soil pH, the associated cations, those are positively charged particles, as well as aluminum and iron oxides in the soil. In this picture, a negatively charged anionic dye has been poured on the soil surface. As water events, such as rainfall and irrigation, occur, The water carries or pushes the dye, much in the same way that sulfate and nitrate move through the soil profile. This is why it's important to have a sulfur fertilizer like one of our Tiger-Sul products. Tiger-Sul products are composed primarily of elemental sulfur and bentonite clay. This sulfur bentonite does not move through the soil profile until converted to sulfate. Now, the same is true with the oxide formulations of our micronutrients. In the soil, Tiger-Sul products are converted by bacteria, primarily thiobacillus, to sulfuric acid and then onto plant available sulfate. Now, if a metal micronutrient is in the sulfur bentonite matrix, zinc, let's say, the sulfuric acid converts the oxide to the plant available sulfate form, in this case, zinc sulfate. Now, the exception is our Tiger boron 2%. It's water soluble since it's in the sulfur bentonite matrix as sodium tetraborate. Now, this graphic from the University of Tennessee Institute of Agriculture shows the severity of sulfur deficiency in a cotton field. Now, this area is localized, but still robbing you of yield. Now, what's not shown is the area where the deficiency symptoms aren't showing up yet, but the plants are suffering from hidden hunger. Not to mention, it's increasing the cost of managing weed control and, in some cases, insect control. Limited information is available on the different cotton varieties and their individual levels of sulfur uptake. While this data is from the research conducted in Brazil, it shows the differences between sulfur uptake in the plant by two different varieties of cotton. Now, focus on the red line showing daily total uptake of sulfur by the cotton. Regardless of the variety of cotton, it's critical to have sufficient plant available sulfate throughout the growing season. If sufficient sulfur isn't available, cotton yields will suffer. This is why you should consider using Tiger-Sul products. They can provide a source of season-long sulfur to cotton plants. This is a view from an unmanned aerial vehicle over two different Tiger-Sul test plots, same variety in the same field, in the Mississippi Delta. Now, I've lined up the rows in both pictures to better demonstrate the differences in plant growth between the treated and the deficient plots. These pictures show the difference between the cotton field treated with Tiger-Sul sulfur on the left and the untreated check in the same field on the right. The major thing to look for between the pictures is the light yellow color cotton on the right. If you've noticed how I've lined up the rows between the pictures, you can see that the cotton plants don't grow as well in the deficient areas as compared to the healthy areas. This is another aerial view of a research field in 2019. We were conducting strip trials comparing Tiger 90 CR to an untreated check. Look at the difference between cotton lapping in the rows. These strip trials provide real-world data useful for Tiger-Sul's research and development program as well as cotton producers. Utilizing yield data and aerial imagery, we can determine the best products in cotton. Now, this is a picture taken 2 days after defoliant was applied to the field. Even though the defoliant was applied, the picture on the right shows increased production vegetatively, and the yields were increased over the control. Now, in 2020, Tiger-Sul conducted 13 on-farm trials in Mississippi. The test involved strip trials of Tiger 90 CR sulfur, Tiger boron 2%, and Tiger zinc 18%. Now, again, the Tiger 90 CR is a sulfur bentonite material. The Tiger boron 2% is a matrix of 80% sulfur bentonite and water-soluble 2% sodium tetraborate. Tiger-Sul zinc is an 18% is a matrix of 65% sulfur bentonite and 18% zinc in the oxide formulation. This is only 1 year of data. However, it shows the importance of sulfur, boron, and zinc in cotton production. But as you know, 1 year of data isn't enough on which to base critical decisions. These are Tiger-Sul cotton trial results that are the averages of 4 years, 4 states, and 78 on-farm trials. What I want to point out to you is the number of on-farm tests and the positive averages of Tiger-Sul products when compared to the control. All show an increase in lint yield. The sheer number of tests and the positive results speak volumes. This brings us to discussing the proper time to apply Tiger products. Tiger 90 CR and Tiger Zinc can be applied in the fall along with any mixed fertilizer in order to reduce application cost. Fall application provides adequate time for the pastille to fracture into bite-sized particles for conversion to the sulfate in the spring when the temperatures are favorable. Tiger 90 CR Tiger Zinc 18%, as well as Tiger Boron 2%, can be applied in the spring before planting. As the pastille absorbs the water and dries, it fractures the elemental sulfur into small particles. Now, the rate of release is controlled by the particle size of the elemental sulfur, the microbial populations in the soil, the amount of air and water, as well as the soil temperature. We do not recommend applying Tiger products after the plants have emerged from the soil. Well, that concludes my presentation on Tiger-Sul products and sulfur and cotton production. This only covers some basic information. For more information, please contact your Tiger-Sul account manager or Tiger-Sul agronomist at tigersul.com.